On this episode of China Unscripted, 5 years after the massive Hong Kong pro-democracy protests, how is the Hong Kong diaspora continuing the fight? Welcome to China Unscripted. I'm Chris Chappell.
I'm Shelley Zhang.
And I'm Matt Ganeshta.
And we just want to once again promote our digital Hong Kong Lenin wall. We'll put the URL up on screen, also the link below. But this has been a fantastic project we've been working on with the Hong Kong Democracy Council, who we're about to hear from in just a moment.
So if you haven't seen it yet, or if you haven't gone there and left your own message, please go there now. The link is on screen and below. And you can see like these thousands and thousands of different messages in support of Hong Kong or, against the CCP. And it's really inspiring to see what everyone's done. But importantly, we want you watching this to go there and contribute and to let your friends and family know about it.
Because the CCP hates it.
Oh, yeah. In fact, the CCP, we just learned they blocked it with their great firewall of China.
Yeah, it's not so great.
Well, yeah, I mean, they can't let something like a digital Lenin wall stand. So please, if you see this, go post on the wall. If you've posted, get a friend or family member to post too. We've worked with a security team on it, so it does not, show any of your identifying data, no cookies, no
IP
addresses, like everything is secure. So you're not in any danger from posting on the wall.
Yeah, and the reason this is important is, as we'll hear, what the Chinese Communist Party is doing is trying to divide and separate people. They don't want this sense of community, of people being able to share their experiences with each other. So this really is something that has a real tangible impact. So please sign. It's hkleninwall.com. And now, joining us is Carmen Lau. She's a former elected Hong Kong District Councillor, and she's now an International Advocacy and Program Associate at Hong Kong Democracy Council. Thank you very much for joining us today, Carmen.
Thank you for having me.
So, I think what's shocking to me, all right, you were an elected official in Hong Kong. Now you're living outside of Hong Kong, essentially in exile. What happened?
So I fled Hong Kong in 2021 July, which is almost 3 years ago. And it was when the time after so many of my friends were arrested, because I used to work for one of the legislators who is now in jail, who is also one of the 47. And I also led the Civic Party when I was in Hong Kong. So during the time after the massive arrest and when the trial started for the national security law cases, me, myself, and also a lot of my colleagues in the district councils, we all were being surveilled and shadowed and harassed by perhaps people from national police or state media. And there was a time when I felt that my personal safety has been affected. And even
though you were elected as a district councillor, like people voted for you.
Yeah, it was in 2019. It was amid the democratic movement, and since the election day happened right after the CUHK and the PolyU sages, and a lot of Hong Kongers, they actually utilized their votes to speak out for themselves and to express their disagreements to the government. So many of us, although we were green, we were new to the politics in Hong Kong, we got elected not only because the Hong Kongers believed in us, but also because of the political environment by then.
Yeah, I remember that election because essentially district council is like a local government position, right? It's not, you're not in the legislature. It's not really seen as political usually, but because this was the one outlet that people had to express how they were feeling about, the protests and the Hong Kong government's response to the protests, that overwhelmingly the pro-democratic people who were running for district council got elected. So it was definitely, I remember like a lot of people talking about how, what a unique and interesting circumstance that was.
Yeah, that's totally true. And over 2/3 of pro-democratic candidates were elected. You could imagine, like, we have over 300 seats in the district councils across 18 districts in Hong Kong, and over 250 pro-democratic candidates won in the elections. So it was a massive victory to us. But not long after, the regime they wouldn't stand to have so many pro-democratic candidates to be elected as officials. So after that, we actually received a lot of obstacles, and not only in the government, even though we talked apolitical issues in the district council, we would face a lot of obstacles and difficulties from the departments in the government.
Like what, for example?
For example, perhaps just a simple local policies about water usage or water waste usage in my district, Wong Tai Sin. And we may want to invite government officials or higher rank or higher up from the local departments to come to the district council to discuss the issues with us. They wouldn't accept our invitation, and in their sense, in their narrative, they told the public that we try to politicalize every of the policies or issues in the society, but it's them to politicalize the district council instead.
It's amazing. It's like they're really trying to punish the people of the different districts for daring to not toe the party line.
Yeah, I mean, like, you could never have like a 2/3 pro-democratic majority in the Hong Kong legislature just because of the way the system is set up, right, with the special constituencies and stuff like that. So they tried their hardest to make sure that never happened. But the fact that it happened in the district council seemed to have caught them out of, like, they caught them also they weren't expecting it, essentially.
Yeah, true. And it was a hard time, but it also, to me, it was also the best of time that Hong Kongers demonstrate our eagerness to democracy and freedom in Hong Kong. And so I really cherish that 1.5 years when I was in the office.
Were you still in office when you left, or had they?
No, I was forced to resign in 2021 because apart from the national security law, the government also imposed a patriotic oath, compulsorily asked district councillors to, pledge to be patriotic and to obey not only the rule of the Hong Kong government, but also the PRC government. And by that time, a lot of us refused to take the oath because it wasn't. It was not a just procedure, I would say. It was amid of our time in the office. It's not in the beginning or before, but it was in the middle of the time when we served as a district councillor. So a lot of us actually refused to take the oath, and we were basically forced to resign.
I mean, I think also what stands out to me is that, like, Carmen, you were a member of the Civic Party, which is seen as, a very moderate correct me if I'm wrong, but it's seen as one of the more moderate pro-democratic parties, well, that existed previously in Hong Kong, right? And it's not like you were doing something super radical.
Like promoting Hong Kong as an independent country.
Yeah, there are other parties that were more like going that way, but the Civic Party is like the OG in some ways in terms of like the Hong Kong Democratic parties, right? So fairly moderate. Like the legislator you worked for, did they get arrested because they participated in like the primary elections?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was all because of the primary elections of the pro-democratic camp, and he was arrested along with the other 46 defendants because of that. And he's now still serving in detention, and we are assuming a verdict will come soon this summer. But it's already been over 3 years, and it's, I mean, as a person who personally knows a lot of them, because some of the others, although we weren't party fellows, we were also friends who met or who befriend during the democratic movement in 2019. So it is until now is a really hard and heavy issue to talk about. But it was because of the primary elections organized by pro-democracy camps in 2020, where a lot of Hong Kongers actually voted in that primary elections. And a lot of the district councillors' offices had been assisting the elections by helping to co-organize or organize local forums, and also lend out our offices as the polling station. So my office was also one of the polling stations, and I also organized the primary elections in the local level. So that's also the reason why a lot of the politicians back in Hong Kong, or activists in Hong Kong, either they are now in jail, or many of us are now currently in exile as well. That was one of the largest events that we found that the government may want to weaponize it to arrest a lot of politicians.
Could you just explain that election to people? Because I think for Americans, this just kind of blows our mind that this is what
primary
people were arrested for doing.
Actually, in the past, after the transition of sovereignty in 1997, so there were two major democratic parties in Hong Kong, which are the Democratic Party and also the Civic Party. And also there are other pro-democratic parties as well. And in the Legislative Council elections, most of the time, the pro-democratic camp may organize some sort of primary events or hustings events in order to get to utilize our supporters' votes at max, because in Hong Kong the electoral system for the Legislative Council were proportional votes. So if we could utilize the number of the votes for the pro-democratic camps, we could get the largest number of candidates from the pro-democratic camp to the Legislative Council. And it was in 2020, after the 2019 movement broke out, and people in the pro-democratic camp found it particularly important to navigate, or to maximize our voices in the upcoming Legislative Council elections. So all of the pro-democratic political parties, they were trying to gather together and to select the best candidates to get into to run for the Legislative Council elections in order to get the most seats in the upcoming council. And so no one's had ever thought that hosting or organizing a primary in Hong Kong would be an illegal event, because we had done that before, and it was some sort of normal democratic process, I may say, in an election. So we've never thought that it would be illegal. And but then it was so surprised that the government would use the national security law to arrest people who organize or who participate in the elections, using the reason that because many of the candidates in these primary elections has called for voting against the financial budgets of the government in the coming year if the government would not respond to our 5 demands. And this is the line that they have been using. Also, this is the lines that they have been emphasizing in the court. But to us, as a legislator who used his rights to cast a veto vote on the government's budget, has never been an illegal behavior to the whole world, right? Basically, to many of the democracies. And but then the Hong Kong government have been using this to to charge and to arrest many of the candidates during the elections, the primary elections.
I mean, considering they're just putting people in jail without any kind of due process for years on end, I can see obviously why you wanted to flee Hong Kong. Did you have any challenges? Like, is it difficult? Because since they're arresting people in mass, how difficult is it for people like you to actually get out of Hong Kong?
I keep it very confidential. Not until 2 months after I left Hong Kong, I announced that I have left. And I purchased the ticket a week before the days that I left. And I kept extremely confidential. Not even my parents would know until few days before I have to leave. And one thing that a lot of us has been doing was to purchase a round trip ticket, and to fool the people around that we would come back. And and I did face a little bit of difficulties when I get through the border at the Hong Kong airport, and but I must say I'm quite lucky, and I wasn't as highest profile or the most prominent activists or politicians by then. So it was just a little bit of difficulty being asked a few of the questions and stopped at the border, but they released me and allowed me to get on the plane after that too.
I mean, that must have been personally very difficult, though, to have to say goodbye to your parents.
Yeah.
To leave your home.
Yeah. I must say my situation wasn't the worst, and I am quite lucky that my parents were quite supportive by then, 3 years ago. And so it was really tough to leave the cities that I was born and raised in, and invested a lot of time there, to the community, to the society. And even during that time, I was still drenched in the guiltiness that I was forced to resign and cannot complete my duty to the supporters who voted for me in the elections. So there was a lot that I still wanted to do, but then at the same time, I also felt that I perhaps can do more if I am free. And I also didn't want it to be another burden for the people because for myself, I must admit it that I wouldn't stop talking about or to be compromised. So I could anticipate that I would still speak up. So if that's the case, then I would post myself in danger and may cause a lot of troubles, and financially and physically and mentally burden to not only my family but people around me, and also perhaps, for example, the legal resources or many of the political prisoners' support resources will need to be shared. So to calculate and trying to utilize myself and my voice. So I have I didn't think that I have a choice that I not to leave. Yeah.
I mean, if you had not left when you did, do you think you would be in jail now?
I mean, people here in the UK who are still being sort of politically active has always been, talking about or asking ourselves about for this question as well. But then we could never anticipate the future that we weren't in, and I might be or might not be, but then I must say, until now, I still found that for myself, I could do more if I am outside. But I always wanted to go back. I missed a lot of things there. Not only the place, but more than that is the people inside Hong Kong, and of course my families and relatives as well.
Now that it's been 5 years since the 2019 protests, um, how do you feel about those protests looking back? How do you think that the Hong Kongers, including those now in exile, feel about them?
Uh, we, as times passed, I have left Hong Kong for 3 years now, and memories or place or um, memories of Hong Kong basically has been I started to feel a little bit distant with the Hong Kong community inside Hong Kong. Um, but then we are, particularly because the national security law and also the Article 23 and the bounties actually affected a lot for the communication between people outside and people inside. The chilling effects and also the fear that's imposed among the diaspora and also the on the ground community has been really effective, I may say. And but we are still kind of trying our best to connect and to bridge ourselves to people on the ground and to people who are still, working so hard to find alternatives or find some ways to continue the spirit of the movement inside Hong Kong. And we are uh, I mean, definitely all of us are afraid or being threatened by so many oppressions happening inside and outside Hong Kong. But we, the democratic movements happened in 2019. It's always the memories that keep us, keep us up or keep us to continue to our fights, even though we are now in exile, feeling a little bit detached with Hong Kong.
Oh, you suggested that there are threats now to you while you're living in exile. Oh, what kind of threats are you facing?
Uh, so the transnational repression to Hong Kongers or the Hong Kong diaspora has been rising, and you could see lots of bounties and arrest warrants has been issued to activists, and I myself was wanted as well in 2021, and although I do not have a bounty on my head, but still it posed a lot of um, you know fear to the community because they saw that activists or high profile prominent political leader are being targeted by the Hong Kong government right now. And the Hong Kong government has been utilizing not only national security law and Article 23, but also other miscellaneous laws to go behind people who may want to voice out dissent voices overseas. And also, there's been physical assaults, intimidations, surveillance happened in the US, in the UK, where a lot of Hong Kongers reside in now. My team, the Hong Kong Democracy Council, we've organized a protest last year, November, in San Francisco with the Tibetan and also Uyghur community, and against Xi Jinping's visits to San Francisco during the APEC summit. And we got surveilled, and my colleague Anna Kwok, she got death threats ahead of time. And we were being assaulted and targeted during the protests. And so all of the time we knew that it was done by the CCP. It was mobilized by the CCP's proxies or their organizations, their related organizations. But then recently, there's been developments in the UK that a few of the intelligence agents were revealed by the UK courts that it was directly, suspiciously was directly appointed or, directly from the Hong Kong government, these sort of intelligence activities to Hong Kongers or to Hong Kong activists. And so all sort of transnational repression or surveillance or harassment has been ongoing within the Hong Kong diaspora as well. Not only to people who can be named, but also general Hong Kong diaspora here in the UK. So these sort of events and activities has been, posing threats to a lot of us who wanting to continue our fight for freedom in the diaspora.
How do you deal with this kind of situation? Because I think looking back, this is essentially one way that the CCP had destroyed the pro-democracy movement after the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre. A lot of Chinese pro-democracy activists had gone into exile in the US or in other places, and essentially the CCP really targeted they target all dissident groups, really, like Tibetans, Uyghurs, Falun Gong, like all dissident groups. They try to, I think, sow that distrust in these communities, try to essentially stir up trouble, try to get people, try to spy on these people. There was a case in New York a few years ago where this police officer who is Tibetan, or I forget if he was Chinese posing as Tibetan, but he was essentially accused or indicted of surveilling the Tibetan community in New York City for the CCP. I imagine this would, sow a lot of fear and distrust in these diaspora groups that you're trying to build a movement around. So how do you fight that kind of thing?
We just so the Hong Kong diaspora is quite new as a diaspora, and we just starting to develop and to grow our overseas civil society. And all of the time we expected that this sort of surveillance or transnational repression would be done by Chinese authorities. The news is still relatively new to us, and I must say we are still learning and trying to make ways, to cater or to sort out what should we do in order to tackle these sort of issues. And I think we are still learning, and there's a lot we have to learn, or to to know our enemy well, before we have any further strategy or tactics to tackle these sort of issues. But I think for now, the Hong Kong diaspora is still, we are developing a trust system, and glad that a lot of Hong Kongers who in the UK and the US, they are still very willing to devote their time and energy to build the diaspora civil society, so that whenever the trust system grows, and also our network grows, I must say, the more people we have inside the network, the safer we will be, and the easier we could tackle this sort of untrust or spying activities. It was so easily to be pointed out, I must say. Yeah, but we are taking extra steps to be cautious to this issue too.
Do you think the US and UK government are doing enough to protect you and the Hong Kong diaspora from Chinese transnational repression?
Uh, there's certainly a lot more can be done. Taking the APEC protest as an example, we first-hand experience that local authorities and local governments do not have a comprehensive knowledge, or do not have a comprehensive picture in navigating the dynamics amongst Chinese, Tibetan, Uyghur, Hong Kong community. And it was also one of the reasons why a lot of conflicts or assaults would happen, because there's a lot of things that could be done better by, or organized, or planned better ahead of time to prevent this sort of assault or transnational repression happened. And so one thing is education to frontline officers and also local authorities. It also applied to the UK as well, because we could see a lot of local councils or police, they do not have the knowledge to differentiate the Hong Kong and the Chinese community, and a lot of incidents happen from there. And the second thing is some assertive move or assertive activities are waited to be done by the higher governments. So far for now, since the bounties and also the implementation of the Article 23, we didn't see sanctions, for example, imposed to Hong Kong officials, to the CCP's officials. We didn't see a lot of diplomatic actions had to be done in responding to the crackdowns. Once again, the second wave of crackdowns on human rights in Hong Kong, and there definitely there's been lots going on in the world right now, and it's the elections year this year as well. The US and the UK are also having their elections, presidential and general elections, ongoing respectively. We have been expecting more response from both governments in response to the China policy, and also in response to safeguarding Hong Kongers, no matter they're overseas or on the ground, their safety and their rights and freedom. And the first thing is, so in the US, a lot of activists and advocacy group have been advocating to to review and to shut down the Hong Kong Economic and Trade offices, which we see as a proxy of the Hong Kong government and PRC government in the American and the British soil. And we are yet to have any progress in these three aspects. And in protecting dissidents, I must say, humanitarian pathway is also an essential tool for democracies, to protect people who are under repression.
Yeah, wasn't one of the people who was indicted in the UK, like, didn't he do some work for the Hong Kong, Economic Trade Office?
Yes, he's a manager. According to public documents, he is a manager in the London Hong Kong Economic and Trade offices. Yeah.
So then he was also indicted for essentially like spying on Hong Kongers for the CCP.
Yeah.
So yeah,
It amazes me that countries around the world allow the CCP to do these kinds of things on their soil.
I think the FBI has been doing more in terms of like transnational repression over the last few years and publicizing these cases and doing these public indictments. But there obviously is a lot more that goes on that they don't cover or haven't investigated. So it's a really tricky issue.
Yeah, I think the problem is that there's no red lines for China or the Hong Kong government that, like, if you do this, there will be these consequences. Currently, there really are not a whole lot of consequences for China or the Hong Kong government doing any of this.
Right. I remember several years ago, there was so much spying happening from the Chinese consulate in Houston that the U.S. government just shut down that whole consulate. But that was a pretty unusual case. But if they can do that, they can also do that with the Hong Kong offices, because those are essentially spying hubs.
Yes, indeed. And there has been a lot of reports and investigation being published by non-profits or think tanks recently, both in the UK and the US. And not only the consulate has been served as a spying agent, but also a lot of Chinese secret police has been conducting their works on the American soil. And I must say there's a lot can be done, but it cannot be done after incidents happened. We always wish the government could pose prevention measures instead of responding to incidents after they happened. So and one of the other reasons that we question about the legitimacy of the Hong Kong Economic and Trade Office, not only because they has been served as a spying agents for the Hong Kong and the PRC government, but also since the reason of the HAETOs are allowed to operate in the US and the UK was because Hong Kong was seen as a autonomous region from the PRC, and that's why they can have an identical office operate here in the US. And but after the crackdowns, after 2019, a lot of evidence can demonstrate that Hong Kong is no longer an autonomous region, and one country, two system, as promised in the Basic Law, isn't there anymore. So we, in these two, major reasons, we do think that the government should take a step forwards, at least to review its diplomatic privileges and immunities.
So, what is the vision for the future of Hong Kong that you and the Hong Kong Democracy Council is trying to present? Is it one where the system is reformed somehow, or is there any hope for Hong Kong as long as the CCP is ultimately in charge?
In the long-term vision, we see Hong Kongers should take back our rights to self-determinations, because as a former colony of the British people, and we once our once our rights to self-determination supposed to have to be protected by international law. But then it was during the 70s and 80s, during the discussion between the PRC and the UK government, our rights to self-determination had been taken away, and Hong Kongers have never have a chance to speak up for ourselves when talking about our future, or Hong Kong's future. And we, in a long-term vision, I do see that we should take back these rights that we have been once being taken away, and in and how to restructure a democratic Hong Kong, or how to rebuild Hong Kong as Hong Kong, should be started from there. And I do see that Hong Kong should be an autonomous and democratic, at least in our future, and also to people should have our own rights to decide, to determine our destiny too.
I noticed you're not suggesting that Hong Kong be an independent country, at least in what you said. But how can Hong Kong have a free and democratic society under the Chinese Communist Party? Is that still possible at this point?
So there's been, a lot of cross movements collaborations, and more cross movement collaborations among the Hong Kong, Uyghur, Taiwanese, and also Chinese pro-democratic movements. And we do agree that as oppressed region from the PRC government, we do feel that China should be democratic as well. And of course, we have different struggles, and we have different historical backgrounds in different regions and oppressed regions. And but then we are striving for one same goal, is to create a democratic, not only a democratic region, not only a democratic Asia, but also a more democratic world. So that's why there's been a lot of cross movements, collaborations has been ongoing, and I think that's our same goal.
I think that's great to hear, because what the CCP always tries to do is divide people. And you mentioned before that they do a lot to try and divide the Hong Kong diaspora.
Or divide the Hong Kong diaspora from the people still in Hong Kong, cut off that communication, yeah.
But from what you're saying, like, despite them trying to do that, there's actually they're bringing a lot of different types of people together. They're the Hong Kong diaspora, the pro-democracy Chinese activists, the Uyghurs, Tibetans, Falun Gong, Taiwan. All of these outside groups are, from what you're saying, it seems like they're forming something new. They've been united by the CCP.
Yeah, that's true. Not only people who are around the region, but also people people who believe in democracies and freedom around the world started to getting together, because we could see threats from autocracies has been worsening in recent year. Particularly, you can see during the Russian and Ukraine war, and also what's happening in Gaza as well. autocracies and people who are in power with, evil thoughts has been working together, and, threatening many many peoples from free countries. So there, we, as an activist, we always see a lot of things going on in the world, and of course we cannot, we cannot dedicate ourselves in every of the cause, but what we can do is to collaborate together and to, to to be united, like people in Middle East, people in Central Asia, people in Asia, Southeast Asia. We are people who are oppressed in these sort of regions. I must say we are facing the same threats, and from the same group of people too. Yeah.
And that is interesting too, because it's not just, for example, Iranian democracy activists. It's not just they have their own issues with autocracy in Iran. Very much the CCP itself is pulling a lot of the strings behind the scenes of all of these authoritarian countries. So everyone kind of has the same enemy, the Chinese Communist Party.
I'm now remembering that cartoon that was kind of a meme during the 2019 Hong Kong protests, where it was like a Grim Reaper knocking on different doors, and it was like the one door was like Xinjiang and it's open already, and like one door, and like the door they're knocking on is Hong Kong, and then like after Hong Kong there's Taiwan, there's like it's essentially about how, if Hong Kong falls, then Taiwan and like all these other places are in danger too.
Yeah, true. And this is also, I people from recently, I've talked to people in Europe, and they may not be very knowledgeable in speaking of the China issues, but then they do have the sense that once they tolerate Russia's aggressions, the next battlefield will be in Taiwan. And even people who are not very familiar with the landscape in Asia Pacific, they would have that sense of feelings too. So it is so important that at this time, at this moment, people across different movements and across different causes should work together and, to defend what we believe.
Yeah, I actually, it's interesting. The Hong Kong Lenin Wall, that website that we posted, we've gotten not a few.
We've gotten a lot.
We've gotten a lot of comments from Europe, from Poland, from
Lithuania,
the Czech Republic. Yeah, places that you wouldn't necessarily think of as being that related to Hong Kong, but people still,
they've been touched by communism.
Yeah, and they sympathize with Hong Kong. And I think there's certain, like the Czech Republic has had issues with the Chinese Communist Party because of Taiwan. There are different places that, it all touches together in different ways.
Yeah, true. There's been the Lenin Wall has been a viral symbol for the Hong Kong movement, not only in for 2019 but also for 2014. And I remember when my constituencies, which was in Wong Tai Sin, there was a Lenin Wall there as well, outside of the MTR, the train station. And during 2019, before the Lenin Wall was destroyed by the government or was, banned by the government, there wasn't only messages to people who to people, pro-democratic people, but also in Hong Kong. But also we saw messages from the Chinese community in Hong Kong, and we also saw a lot of messages in different languages, speaking of their causes. In 2019 and 2020, during around that time, I remember there was also some, civil disobedience in Ukraine, and also there was an environmentalist protest happening in Bolivia, and I remember one time when I, read through the messages in the Lenin Wall in Montaisin. I saw, support messages towards these movements as well. And as it is, Lenin Wall isn't a thing that invented by Hong Kongers or invented during the Hong Kong movement, but then the spirit of the Lenin Wall has inspired Hong Kongers to, to replicate these sort of things here inside Hong Kong. And then after our movements being known by the world, and people from other movements, they also show their support to Hong Kongers through these sort of messages as well. And I must say, the spirit of Lenin Wall goes beyond the Hong Kong movement. Although it's a symbol of Hong Kong movements, but it goes beyond that very much and connects people around the world in defending what we believe. And it is really a powerful tool that it makes the government wanted it to be disappeared. So it is really precious to have one sort of, online version, a digital one, simply perhaps to connect people around the world. Just as you said, there's been a lot of different messages from different corners of the world, and I found it really amazed that what we are doing is actually connecting people.
We really appreciate all the help the Hong Kong Democracy Council has given in helping make the digital Lenin Wall a reality.
Yeah, it also, we are so thankful for this opportunity to collaborate and to make something meaningful. And we always say in Cantonese or in Chinese, we always say these are the things that make our movements to have humanity or to have temperature. What we say in Cantonese is, and it's always tiring, and no matter people who are inside or outside of Hong Kong, we are struggling. We have been drenched in heavy news, sad news inside Hong Kong, or drenched in the fear that our family and friends would get repressed by the regime. And it is really essential to have such a symbolic things to be published in this painful anniversary of our really historical moments back in 2019.
Yeah, I know there were the big protests in 2014. 5 years later, the 2019 protests. Now we're 5 years later from that. I know the CCP is trying everything it can to keep you separated from the people in Hong Kong, but I can't imagine, having seen 2 million people march 5 years ago and seeing the way the district council elections went, I can't imagine that they've succeeded in squashing that Lion Rock spirit inside Hong Kong.
In the diaspora, as a people in exile, I could only say that people are still trying, and we are still trying to resist and to be, to persist the aggression of the regime or the repression, persecution of the regime. And as voices in the diaspora, we are still hoping to have that one moment that could spark another wave of movement again inside Hong Kong. But I must say the movement is still ongoing, and Hong Kongers are still very determined in in you know in defending our own rights and defending democracy in Hong Kong. And people in the diaspora, although there's been a lot of obstacles to being connect with people inside Hong Kong, but just as what I said before, we really want to bridge um, everyone who believes in freedom and democracies together, and to empower ourselves in this hard time, to wait until the moments that until the moment comes. And we hope that we really have the vision, and hope that that moment will come really soon.
Yeah, I hope so too. I remember we were in Hong Kong in 2014 for the umbrella protests. And then we went back in 2016 because we were just doing like a general like reporting tour in Asia. And there was no big movements happening in 2016. And I remember we had lunch with this CNN reporter who had been living in Hong Kong for many years. And he was like, yeah, like people are kind of depressed. Like it seems like the people who were in the protest movement 2 years ago, because by 2016 people had been arrested, like, there was definitely the government was trying to squash that and make sure it didn't happen again. And I do remember, like we interviewed Joshua Wong in 2016 too. And so the prevalent feeling at the time, though, that it was kind of like very, like everything was very, very like low.
Burned out.
Yeah. I would not have imagined 2019 happening just 3 years later. We interviewed
Denise Ho a couple weeks before.
It was at the Oslo Freedom Forum at the very end of May, and she was like, "Oh yeah, we're having these protests. We hope that some people will come about the extradition law bill and all this stuff."
And a few people came.
And a few people came. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
including us, we had no idea.
Yeah, you're correct that like you don't know what will happen that could spark something else.
Yeah, definitely. What we can do for now is to, although it may take some more time for that moment to come, we could never imagine in 2014, we could never imagine the time would come so fast after 5 years. But then, so after 5 years from 2019, although nothing would happen in a short future, but personally, I do think that something would come really soon. Although it may take relatively a little bit more time, but before that, I think all of us, not only the Hong Kong community or Hong Kong activists, but also people around the world should be ready for that too.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today. If anyone watching wants to follow you or the Hong Kong Democracy Council, where should they go?
We are on every of the social media, and it's hkdc.us if it's on Instagram, Facebook, and for Twitter, we are hkdc_US. And we also have a YouTube channel, but it's in Cantonese. So if you search for HKDC or the Hong Kong Democracy Council, you may see that too.
Well, thank you again for being here today. We definitely support the people of Hong Kong.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Wow, I feel like that was like a rare, uplifting, inspiring podcast. I don't feel horrible about the world and myself.
I mean, I do think that because we're exposing a lot of the things that the Chinese Communist Party does. So whenever we interview an expert who's like, the chip war is coming, or something,
the military
like the Chinese
invasion of Taiwan.
Yeah, so it's often kind of depressing. But yes, I do feel like this hopeful note that the CCP may be able to try to squash that spirit of freedom and democracy briefly, but they won't be able to squash it permanently.
And it's also inspiring to hear, like, in 2014, it seemed like the protests were really about Hong Kongers protesting some very specific Chinese PRC incursion into their system, right? And they wanted that to end. That was the about the universal elections. And what it has transformed into now is more broadly, Hong Kongers recognize that the real problem is the CCP, right? And so by the more the CCP cracked down on Hong Kong in 2019 and today, the more they crack down on Tibetans, the more they crack down on Uyghurs and Falun Gong, the clearer it is to everyone that, actually, it really is the CCP that's got to go.
I feel like we always forget Inner Mongolia.
Or Southern Mongolia, as locals like to call it.
Or East Turkestan.
Right. And, and parts of India and Bhutan that have been taken over, and
Taiwan.
Taiwan, which is about to be
maybe not about to be.
There could
an ongoing attempt.
Yes. The Philippines, which has seen serious territorial incursions this past week with the pirate Chinese Coast Guard coming in with like axes and knives. Like, it's crazy.
I know. We've always compared the CCP to gangsters, but they're actually pirates.
But not like the cool kind. Like Lego pirates are
not
cool.
Pirates of the Dark Water, Chris.
No, pirates. Oh my gosh. Don't get me started on that. We'll go. That show needs to be brought back. They didn't finish it.
Okay.
They didn't have the last episode. Come on. How will Ren defeat the Dark Water? I don't know. I've been waiting for like 35 years. Gosh.
Oh, wow. I really touched a nerve.
Yeah,
there.
you did.
We were,
If I have committed enough virtuous good deeds in the world and the heavens feel like I deserve some kind of reward, it's the last episode to Pirates of Dark Water. And even in my greatest wish is even a gift to humanity.
I feel like you're going to get an email from Chris, I have the last episode of Pirates of the Dark Water.
No, it was never made.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't that it wasn't aired. It was just never made.
Okay. I was going to be like, if you want it, say you love me on camera. From Xi Jinping. You know what I mean? Like, I just feel like that's like...
I mean, I would, but it doesn't exist, so...
So they don't have that leverage.
No.
You know that if you got that email, it would be a lie.
Yeah.
What were we talking about?
Hong Kong, I believe.
Yeah.
Oh, and how the CCP is bringing all these groups together to recognize the true source of the problem.
Yeah, I think once we start talking about other countries, then we can start being like, and the Czech Republic, and it just starts getting like further and further out to.
Because the CCP's influence, and I mentioned this in the podcast, it's spreading everywhere. It's this great darkness, like a dark water, spreading all over the world. And there needs to be a final episode where the darkness is finally beaten back and the light returns to the world.
Well, you may have your final episode of Pirates of the Dark Water in a different form then. Symbolically. Well, I it's something that occurred to me when Carmen was talking is that like the CCP is really essentially they have imprisoned or exiled the best people of Hong Kong in a way, right? Like the people who like she studied government and public administration in university. Like she wanted to be a district councillor. These are people who want to give back to their communities, right? Like they want to like support the place that they grow up in. And now instead she's in exile. Like
that's what always happens under communist systems. The good and the skilled get cast aside for the violent and brutish.
Now I'm just thinking about like the Hong Kong police tear gassing everybody.
Yes.
And what a difference there was in 2019 versus 2014.
Yeah. The Hong Kong police, the ones had like a great reputation in Asia, changed very quickly.
Yeah, once the CCP started, and there were reports that they had been trained by Chinese police, and then it just all went downhill.
But I mean, we need to trade with China and they work with them on climate change. So
Yeah, I'm sure that China cares a lot about climate change in terms of wanting to sell us lots of solar panels made with totally not Uyghur forced labor.
Yep.
But yeah, we were being hopeful, I believe.
Yeah, a little bit of cynicism seeped in there at the end. I
Well,
don't know.
I'm hopeful about the future of Hong Kong, and someday the three of us, as well as many Hong Kongers living overseas, will be able to once again return to Hong Kong and finally visit Lantau Island.
Oh, yeah. I do feel bad about that. Every time we went to
sorry,
Hong
Matt.
Kong, pretty much every day we were in Hong Kong. In 2014 and 2016 and 2019, Matt just wanted to see Lantau Island. And Shelly and I were like, we're tired, we're busy, another time.
We're
Another
so
day.
exhausted. It's a whole day trip. We'll do it
We'll
next
do it
time.
next time. And now,
And now we'll do it next time.
we were right. We'll do it next time.
We'll do it next time. It just is like a little longer than we were expecting. Sorry,
Yeah.
Matt. Actually, does it make you feel better at all that the airport is on Lantau Island? So technically, you've seen it a bunch.
That does not make me feel. It makes me feel worse.
Okay.
It's like we were right
Oh.
there on the edge.
You were the one feeling good at the end of this podcast, and now you're feeling worse.
Thanks.
Great.
Hey,
Chris.
guys, let's talk about the Lenin Wall one more time.
Oh, yes. Hey, go to hkleninwall.com and leave a message of support for the nice people like Carmen and all the other Hong Kong activists who this really means something to them. And I hope you have a sense of that now.
Yeah, it is. It is like, if you're a Hong Konger reading this, imagine that you see that now there's thousands and thousands of people around the world who are like, we support you. And it's easy to give up when you're living in exile and like everything seems bad and you're being spied on and all these things. But yeah, I mean, you can do this. You can let people know that they're supported. So leave your message there. And also, if you can let just 2 people know and encourage them to post about it and then let 2 more people know, very soon there'll be quite a lot more comments.
Yeah, I mean, I think we wanted to do this for the Hong Kongers, the Hong Kong protesters, but also for our audience who are, watching this, because we know that often people will comment to us or write to us that like you wish there was something you could do about the CCP. Like it's easy to feel kind of powerless when you're like, okay, well, what can I do in my daily life, right? I'm not in the State Department. I'm not, doing U.S. policy. I'm not doing all of these, like, some of these, like, bigger things when it comes to how to fight back against the CCP. But I know it seems like a small thing to do, maybe not even worth it in some ways, but believe me, this is where the CCP is weakest. And this is the thing that they're most afraid of, is people remembering, people supporting, people fighting back against the CCP. So that it's actually quite powerful. I mean, I remember this is a different protest movement, but when we interviewed Fang Zhen, who had been he was this student athlete who had been at the Tiananmen Square massacre, and then he lost both his legs below the knee because he was run over by a tank. And he talked about how essentially after he finally left China and went into exile, his main goal was to tell young Chinese people in the diaspora around the world about the Tiananmen Square massacre, because he said that essentially what happened was that, like, because the CCP was able to cover up the history of what they had done for so many years, he said, his parents' generation, lived under the Cultural Revolution but didn't talk about it. And then he, like, as a young, like, idealistic college student in 1989, they believed that the Communist Party could reform because they didn't know, like, about the true history of the CCP. And then after the Tiananmen Square massacre, the CCP started suppressing all of that history so that modern young Chinese people don't know about that. So they don't really know, like, about that brutality of the CCP. So the CCP is essentially able to maintain power by controlling the narrative, controlling what people remember, squashing dissident movements, squashing pro-democracy movements, making sure that everybody's too afraid to speak up, or making sure that people don't like it's only been 5 years since those massive protests in Hong Kong, but what they want is for nobody to be able to commemorate that in Hong Kong, and for the international community to ignore them as well, right? And I know there's like a lot of tough stuff happening in the world right now, but if we don't forget that what happened in Hong Kong in 2019, if we show the Hong Kong people that we haven't forgotten about them, that is actually a very strong blow to the CCP in a place that they're the weakest, they're most afraid of, which is people uniting against them.
So once again, that link is below, hkleninwall.com. Thank you for watching. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell.
I'm Shelley Zhang.
And I'm Matt Gnesta.
We'll talk to you next time.